In this flash lecture, I discuss your self-talk and your writing by discussing Sam Kimball's Identity, Self-Reflection, and Inner Speech essay from our course reader, This Is Not the Book You're Looking For. As a note, in order to best experience this presentation, I do suggest that you have read through the essay at least one time. However, I could also see this presentation helping you to read the essay for the first time. So however you choose to do this, I believe both texts are helpful for the other in understanding it. As far as objectives for this flash lecture, one, by the end you should be able to understand and define self-talk. Two, you should be able to identify Kimball's main points. And three, you should be able to begin thinking about your own habits, your own self-talk, your own writing self-talk, or any other habit you may have and want to think about. To begin, I want to frame our conversation with a brief itinerary that explains where we're going and in which steps we'll take to get there. So first, we discuss, as I define self-talk. Next, I discuss the occasions we might use our self-talk. 3, I ask a few questions about the utility of self-talk. Next, I note a few roadblocks that we might encounter when discussing the utility of our self-talk. Finally, I try to connect self-talk, choice, and responsibility for our writing habits. So to begin, the concept here at hand. Kimball defines self-talk at several levels throughout his relatively short essay in pretty matter-of-fact ways, with a lot of science to back it up if you discuss and encounter his references at the end of his essay. So first and foremostly, we can take it at the word level, self-talk. Well, what is that? Talking to yourself, it seems like, or talking to a self anyway. So we talk to and with ourselves. We like to think, and it may be true, that we talk to ourselves in a way that no one else does or can talk to us. In this way, we seem to grasp ourselves in a way that no one else will. Talking may best be understood here as a metaphor. That is, we're not always talking outside of our heads and making our lips move and using our ears to hear ourselves talk. Rather, we have a good inner monologue, or a way of reflecting internally that we might experience with language or linguistically. Self-talk may more generically be understood as the way we monitor our own habits and deviations from our habits. When we talk about something, for example, you might stub your foot on a doorstep in the morning and it hurts and you might yell out loud, or you might say something inside your head and judge yourself and wonder why you did that. Self-talk is also the way that we experience our own experiences of ourselves. So it's the experience of experience. It's the future of our present that allows us to discuss what's happening now. And things might have just got a bit too meta there for a second, but we'll come back to that point. So some examples of self-talk in action. You can consider any skill set that you've practiced or learned or refined over your lifetime. It can be something as simple as photography or playing the guitar or cello or any musical instrument as the piano. It could be a sport like running or swimming. It could be a team sport like football or soccer or baseball. It could be a science or mathematics like a calculus. It could be something like our course encounters writing. All of these things and anything else you can learn is a skill. It's a skill you practice, and if you don't practice it, you stay at that level. You don't magically become better at the guitar, for example, if you don't actually practice. So in that way, you have to sharpen your skills. This is where self-talk comes in. To sharpen skills, we practice. And as not yet experts, or not as expert as we'd like to be, we seek out practiced experts who can help us. Well, how do they actually do that? Well, if we don't like the results of our habits that we currently possess or we currently enact, we can decide to own and correct or tweak any bad habit, offending habit, thing we don't like that we do. Maybe we eat too much processed sugar. Maybe we stay up late. Maybe we skip class too regularly. Maybe we speed on the highway. Maybe we don't call our parents as often as we'd like to. Any number of habits, anything you can think of that you do is a result of a previous choice and previous series of choices that you've become accustomed to. But as soon as you start asking questions, as soon as you start redoing that habit, relearning that habit, practicing, if you will, to do something different than you're currently accustomed to doing. For example, if you want to play the guitar better, well, you practice. If you want to swim better, you get into the water and you practice. If you want to draw better, you pick up the pencil, pick up the crayons, the colors, whatever it is you use to draw, and you practice more and more and more. If you want to write better, you also practice. Well, how does practicing help if we're practicing the same habits we already have? Before we can get to the next step of asking how we can improve, we have to ask the question why. Why bother? Well, it only matters if you make it matter. So if something doesn't matter to you, you're not going to want to change it. You're not going to think, well, gee, I don't like the way this is going. I should probably improve this. When you do care, however, you start to think, well, it's perhaps worth the bother. We encounter several problems, prospectively at least, when we try to think about our problems. We don't know where our habits come from, and Kimball addresses this. You don't know why you behave the way you do now. You'll never remember what life was like before a certain point, and everything you remember now is a feature of remembering earlier. That is, you remember remembering. We like to think that we're rational beings, however, if we actually think about it, we're prone to forget that we're irrational too. We act out. We don't think at times. For example, if you're driving your car and someone cuts you off and you use your hand to gesture wildly at that person in anger, you're probably not thinking that out, thinking, well, I'm mad. What can I do? Well, I'll use my hands, I'll gesture, I'll wave, and I'll use one or two fingers here or there to make sure the other person sees that I'm mad. Rather, you react. And reacting is a matter of irrationality normally, or practiced rationality, where we have a habit. Also, we don't see the big picture sometimes, so we need to learn to ask questions of ourselves that we're not comfortable asking or don't know how to yet formulate. That is, how do you ask the question about the future you don't know how to enact yet? Lastly, most people don't enjoy criticism, let alone self-criticism. Looking in the mirror sometimes is hard on our own eyes when we get to see what we don't do as well as we'd like to do. That leads to the next step. This is how we get to the how. How does the process work? Well, in this course especially, through this one reading of Kimball's text on identity and self-talk, I need to teach you three things. One, to ask questions that I know to ask. This is the idea about the writing process. You write, and if you continue to practice writing the way you write, you'll continue to get the same results. However, if you ask the questions that I would ask of your writing, you can see where I'm coming from, at the same time practicing new questions about your writing and perhaps improving it through that practice. That in and of itself is an interesting skill to learn, but more importantly, and more meta than that, is asking, why are my questions worth asking? Thirdly, the idea here, the end game here, is to get you to develop your own questions, to take possession of my questions and build questions from them in order to make me or render me irrelevant, to obsolesce me as it were, and say, well, I don't need you anymore, I can ask the questions you ask of me. And once you do that, you are now expert. The idea of learning the rules to break the rules. Once you can do that, well, then you're not in the class anymore and you've succeeded. So in this class, you are responsible for asking questions about your own writing habits. How does this work? Well, you talk to yourself, I talk to myself, we all talk to ourselves, and we have an inner monologue. How we regulate that, then, is our self-talk. If we can inventory our self-talk and ask questions about our self-talk, well, then we might find some answers to habits that we have, and we might be able to determine if we want to change those habits. If we can ask those questions, we can change habits. If we can change habits, we might create different outcomes. In that way, we are always choosing. Even when we are not choosing to choose, when you take a passive role in something, you are choosing. So don't let your habits choose for you unless you trust your habits outright. So in our class, for example, on writing, if you continue to do what you've been doing, you will continue to get the grade you've been doing, perhaps. However, if you can take responsibility for your behavior and your habits, your self-talk, and see how you regulate your own behavior, you might find that you create different outcomes or better outcomes, and you might improve in the way that you practice your skill set, in this case, writing.